What got you there? What got you?
Stephen Kotler is a New York Times bestselling author, executive director of the Flow Research Collective, and peak performance expert. Stephen first appeared on the podcast on episode number 43, where we cover much of his backstory. But on this episode, Stephen discusses his new book, The Art of Impossible, which delves into how to decode motivation, learning, creativity, and flow, previously thought of as unteachable skills. Drawing on his 2 decades of experience, cutting-edge neuroscience research, and interviews with elite performers, on this episode, Kotler distills insights he used to educate over 1,000 people a month, including executives at Fortune 100 companies, Olympian athletes, and members of the U.S. Special Forces.
Stephen, welcome to What Got You There. How are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Very much looking forward to this. And the last time we had you on was 3 years ago on episode 43. So I'm wondering for you, where do you think you've evolved the most for the past 3 years?
Well, I'll answer it if you'll answer it.
Okay. Yeah.
How do you think you've evolved in the last 3 years?
Yeah. So I think I've really largely in part due to these conversations, talking to experts and world leading authorities, much like yourself, it's really reshaped my perception, right? Like we each have our own lenses on the world and how we see things. And all of a sudden we get to talk to all of these change makers who have these completely new paradigm shifts in how we view things. And I think for me, just understanding other people's lenses and then seeing the world differently has kind of been one of the biggest wake ups for me.
That's a great wake up. Over the past 3 years, okay, so honestly, the biggest change, as I said to my wife over the summer, we, after like 10 years of like figuring out how to do it, moved to a new place that is built a house and it's perfect for us. And, you know, my company is doing what I want to be doing. And I said this to my wife, I said, I'm getting used to this very strange new feeling. I don't know what it's called. I think they call it contentment. I'm not sure. It's freaking me out a little. And it really actually was freaking me out because I've sort of run like on like the positive application of fear and anxiety. You know what I mean? My whole life, like I just run at challenge. And that constant like anxiety in my brain sort of keeps me a little safe, right? It's an edge. And I was really nervous that like contentment, that complacency and, you know, blah, blah, blah. And it didn't, turns out, right? Like it actually means much for me, it has meant lower cognitive load, lower crap up here that's getting between me and kind of creative problem solving and good craft, good decision making, all that stuff that's really important to me. But I would never have known because I've literally like, I'm 53 years old. It's the first time in my life I've ever like, yeah, okay, I'm playing at the level I wanted to play at. I'm doing what I wanted to do. I'm doing it with the people I love. I laugh on a regular basis. You know, the quality of the work keeps going up. The quality of the science keeps going. You know, those are the things that matter to me a lot. And, you know, it's a weird lesson for me. You know what I mean? Like, okay, took me long enough, but you know, there's nothing here I won't eventually learn the hard way.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I'm similar, right? Like always tiptoeing where we just got to keep pushing, and that level of contentness. The second you're there, it's like, wait a second, I don't know. I've got to be pushing my boundaries, pushing my limits, and that's why I'm really excited for this conversation. So the new book, The Art of Impossible, we've got it here. I want to start off with how you start the book off. I think this will really set some good context and framework. So I'm going to start with a quote. This is a book about what it takes to do the impossible. In a very real sense, it's a practical playbook for impractical people. It's designed specifically for those of us with completely irrational standards for our own performance and totally unreasonable expectations for our lives. I love it. That's like what I'm fully into. That's why people listen to this show. For you, I want to know where this even came from. This idea of tackling these really big challenges. Where did that start for you?
There's really, my career has sort of been defined by seeking out those moments when the impossible becomes possible. And the truth of the matter is history is littered with those moments. I mean, it's littered with those moments. And I got especially lucky because whether you're talking about science fiction ideas becoming science fact technology, or like individual innovators taking on global challenges like poverty and energy scarcity, or athletes 4-minute miles, biggest cliff huck ever, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff has massively accelerated over the past 20 to 30 years. We've seen more impossibles in a condensed frame of mind, so many so that I used it as a data set. Every domain available, I went in there and I tried to use the tools of neuroscience and psychology, more specifically neuroscience, we could talk about why in a second, to decode what the hell's going on in the brain and the body when people are accomplishing that which has never been done. Paradigm shifting breakthroughs, right? Nothing is the same again, ever feats kind of thing. And it turns out there's a blueprint. And of course there's a blueprint, right? The secret to peak performance is getting our biology to work for us rather than against us. There's just our biology. And especially when it comes to the cognitive side, which is really where the book focuses, the mental side, there are foundational principles, and there's a sequence, there's an order, there's steps, and it's really like doing the impossible seems like this incredibly insane mystery that, rare people figure out. And what could the rest of us learn from that? Nothing. But it turns out it's exactly the opposite. And, the way I frame it in the book is what we've been talking about just now. I've been blabbing for a while, by the way. I'll shut up.
No, I love it.
We've been talking about the 4-minute miles, the cultural impossibles, Rosa Parks sitting at the front of the bus, those kinds of things. That's capital I impossible, right? There's also lowercase I impossible, in my opinion. And that's, I think, where the book really, it does its work. Lowercase I impossible is all that stuff we believe is impossible for us. And at least for a while. And so examples, this could be rising out of poverty. This could be overcoming deep trauma. This could become reaching like true craft mastery and excellence in any of the creative arts, in acting and dance, in theater, becoming a brilliant mathematician or coder or architect. For me, growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, and wanting to be a writer wasn't impossible. I didn't know any writers. The point is, when there's no clear line between where you are and where you want to go, there's no guidelines, there's no map, and statistically, extremely poor chances of success, right? Really, really poor chances of success. When I think about a creative career, I learned this lesson really early on in graduate school. I was told as soon as I got to art school, basically, that 0.05% of everybody comes through 5 years after art school will be working in a creative career. Forget about your chosen field. I'm just talking about a creative career. Like, you have 50 people and half a person in that room can actually do what they want for a living, right? So that's statistically incredibly poor odds of success. Writing is like that. Making films is like that. Becoming a great scientist is like that. I'm interested in people who want to exceed their limitations, exceed their expectations, and level up their game like never before. And I'm interested in the patterns in the brain that underlie that behavior and allow us to make it possible. And that's sort of what the art of impossible is about.
Yeah, I mean, we're at this really cool time now where the neuroscience is actually backing up some of the things that you've been toying with for a long time here. And believe me, we're gonna get into that neuroscience because I absolutely love that. But you said something that I absolutely love, and that's history is littered with the impossible. And you had a great story about a mentor who kind of showed you that the impossible actually does have a formula. Do you remember the story you shared in the book with your mentor?
Are we talking about the magic story, the prestidigitation
Yep,
story?
yeah.
Okay, so I got into this, sort of the earliest example of this. This is the story you wanted to get at. I was 9 years old. I had a big kid brother. He was 7. Comes home from a friend's house, pulls out a bright red sponge ball, shows it to me, shows it to mom, puts it in his other hand, and it disappears. Now, doesn't sound like all that impossible. I get that, but I'm 9 years old. I live in the suburbs of Cleveland, Ohio. I've never seen magic before. And my little brother just did magic. And at that moment in time, I realized 2 things had to be true. One, my little brother wasn't magic, right? He's never levitated. He doesn't walk through walls, can't turn invisible. So, okay, so that's not real. And if you made the impossible seem possible, there has to be a skill set underneath it. And I was fascinated by this idea that like the even impossible illusions could have skill sets. Like you could do things that look impossible and they're not actually. And I dove into magic. I became a magician. I worked for almost a decade as a professional magician. And one of my early mentors, Joe Leffler, used to say, very little is impossible with 10 years practice. He was specifically talking about magic, like the best tricks in the world by the best magicians, the hardest things that there were to figure out. They required massive amounts of dexterity and timing, misdirection, pattern, all these skills, but almost anybody, including me at 11 years old, could do it. And he literally sort of forced me to, this isn't in the book, but he forced me to do it. He said, we had been talking about this trick that had showed up and nobody knew how it was done. It was a beautiful card effect. And he said, why don't you go home, figure this out and do it? It's a trick by the best magician in the world. Figure out how he did it and try to learn it and fool somebody. That's how you know. And I did. It took a very, very, very long time. But, it was this one moment of, oh my God, here's this absolutely impossible thing that less than 1% of even the magicians in the world can do. And I figured it out from scratch. And I was like 11 or 12 or 13 years old. I sort of did it with him working with me, but it was a really great lesson. It took like 5 years to actually practice and get it down. And I think I only successfully ever did it once where I actually fooled people. The trick was so complicated, it would fall apart. My hands were too small, all this shit, but I got it once. And I got that taste of, oh, wow, anything's possible with 10 years practice.
Yeah, you mentioned just getting the taste of that. And I love these epiphany-esque moments throughout our life. I mean, I'm sure we can all point to just a handful that forever changed the trajectory of our life. So I love hearing these backstories for you. I am wondering though, like certain people have these opportunities where they have these moments, a mentor comes in and can shape who they become. And certain people don't go after that. So I'm wondering for you, like what's driving this inside of you that you decide to take on those challenges?
I can't tell you, but I can tell you that I noticed. So I remember getting to college into a creative writing program. Now, mind you, I'm a freshman in college. I've been writing a long time, but I'm just about as bad as everybody else in that class, right? But everybody in the class was competing against each other. Like they wanted to be the best writer in the creative writing class kind of thing. And I always was like, because I'd had this experience at Magic, I was like, I don't give a fuck about like John or Mary sitting across from me. I'm going after Hemingway. I want to kill Thomas Pynchon. Like that's what I wanted to do. And this is, by the way, Hemingway talks about this in writing. Like Hemingway says he wanted to kill Dos Passos, and Norm Mailer said he wanted to kill Hemingway, and George Clinton wanted to kill me. Like there's a tradition of sort of this. And of course you can't kill anybody and you're never going to be a better writer. But like, it never dawned on me that I was competing against the guy sitting next to me or the woman sitting next to me. Just now, I mean, maybe that's not normal. I just never thought about it. I was like, well, find me the best in the world and let's see what they got, right? I'm going to go up against that, even if I get crushed. And that's sort of how I've always approached it. So I don't know, but I also, I will say that a lot of my belief systems about these ideas got a helpful or unhelpful push from my partnership with Peter Diamandis, who founded the X Prize, who I write about in there. Peter wanted to unlock the space frontier, right? Like he wanted people to go into space. NASA said, we can't build a reusable spaceship. It's not possible. Nobody will do it. And Peter said, no, we're going to have a contest for the first team to do it. And it was such an impossibly crazy thing to do. And it was also, by the way, like the third impossible thing Peter had done. I don't tell those stories in the book, but like he's done some of the craziest stuff and he leveled up in such like sneaky, but truthful, like transparent sneakiness in a sense, along the, it's just, like I had for 25 years, one of my closest friends has been a guy who thinks about it the way I think about it. Peter's got laws he lives by. And one of them is if at first you don't succeed, start all over again at the next level up. And right, like I do that all the time, right? Like I'll take on a bigger challenge as a way to solve a lesser challenge kind of thing. A simple example is I was trying to write The Future is Faster Than You Think, which is about converging exponential technologies. And we were putting them together in a world, and I needed to see how they would all work in the 10 years in the future. So I didn't know how to do that in the context of nonfiction. So I switched to fiction. I wrote an entire novel, Last Tango in Cyberspace, where I took all the concepts that we were going to be writing about in Faster, put them into a science fiction book, created a world, and wrote that story. Mind you, I hadn't written a novel in like 25 years. And the last time I did, I wasn't particularly great. It was a ridiculously hard challenge, but it was also the only way to solve the puzzle I had to solve and faster. And those things don't bother me. They don't scare me at all. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, okay, so you got to write a novel in the middle of writing this other book. Cool, go.
You mentioned Peter Diamandis, and I'm pretty sure that's how I actually first came across you. I mean, this is a number of years ago with Bold and just taking on just these massive challenges. So that's an excellent read. We'll link that up in the show notes. But I'm curious, you did mention Peter lives by these certain laws he has. Are these laws he's actually like written out and articulated?
Oh yeah, you can Google Peter's laws. Yeah, there's 24 of them. I think they're actually in Bold now that I think about it. Yeah, because we break them down at one point. But he's got a poster I think you can order if you want. I'm not that bold. You know what I mean? And I believe what works for me probably won't work for you, right? I said this in the book. Oftentimes, one of the problems we see a lot in peak performance and coaching and trying to train up this stuff is people try to train other people in what works for them. And biology scales. It's the thing that works for everybody. It's what evolution designed to work for everybody. Personality. When it comes to peak performance, things like where are you on the introversion to extroversion scale, which is mostly genetic or set up by early childhood experience, or what are your risk tolerances, which really come down to the receptivity of your dopamine receptors and how much dopamine you get, how receptive are the receptors, if that sentence even makes sense. That's genetic, that's stuff, but huge impact, right? I'm a high risk person. I like taking big risks. They don't mess me up. If I try to train others in what works for me and you don't share my risk tolerances, my stuff is going to screw you up badly. It's not going to work for you. And I learned this, by the way, the hard way. You'll notice in and around the self-help space, peak performance space, people sort of get a little bit of knowledge and they start telling their friends how to live their lives, right? And I had this advantage early on in my career because I was publishing books and articles about flow and those things. And so like my friends were coming to me for advice and I was doing blah, blah, blah. In a 3-year period, I put 2 people in the hospital. I nearly caused a divorce. One dude who was very close to me stopped talking to me. We're friends again. Another person who was a very dear friend of mine still hasn't talked to me again. I mean, I broke stuff. Personality doesn't scale. Biology scales. The way I always, if I was training people and to do exactly what I do to get into flow, right? If that's what the idea was, I'd be out there being like, all right, here's what you got to find a deserted part of a mountain with really steep, tight trees. We're going to ski through these trees at 40 miles an hour. We're going to get really stoned and we're going to listen to the Wu-Tang Clan at top volume. That's the plan. That's how you get better. Right? I mean, are you kidding me? But that's so much of bro coaching is exactly that. And it's crazy talk, right? That's not how it works. But if you can get underneath the biology, there's a blueprint that works for everyone.
Yeah, to actually circle back to the beginning question of this conversation, one of the things I learned is, I mean, you listen to certain people and it's like, oh yeah, this is how they did it. I've got to follow this to a T. And I view this as game selection. And I mean, I was just so astronomically off in terms of what I was pursuing because it wasn't aligning with my biology. And so that was a big issue. And that's what I love. You decouple these huge, massive principles and break down the science to how we can find them and kind of manipulate them for our own beneficial personality.
As you probably noticed, 2 things are true. One, I can't prove this, but I can 80 to 90% prove it to you. We appeared as a species to be designed to go big. And one of the ways I can tell you that is if you don't sort of follow the biology, right? If you're not aligned if your motivation isn't aligned properly with the way you set your goals and you blah, 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 the way all these things work together. Those are all there are 9 major causes of depression. 7 of them are essentially getting peak performance things wrong. Depression, anxiety appears to be, we're goal-directed beings, human beings are. We filter the world predominantly through stuff that scares us and stuff we want. And one or the other will win always, basically. But goal direction is what we do at every scale. We do that, and we're built to go after these large challenges. And when you tap into that, it's what is technically called, was named this by a neuroscientist named Jaak Pansep, the seeking system, right? If you tap into the seeking system, for example, it's very healthy for us, right? Passion and purpose, these are powerful intrinsic motivators. Lack of passion, lack of purpose, these are major causes of depression. These are, right, and anxiety. And one of the reasons I think we're seeing so much sort of crippling anxiety, depression, frustration, et cetera, in society is we're not sort of setting our sights on big enough challenges.
So for you, I'm just wondering about you uncovering your purpose, because I know in the book you hit on that. What can someone learn from you? Maybe not the exact same takeaways.
Purpose is easy. Purpose is we put it online, the passion recipe, which is what the book opens with. So here's the simple idea. Human beings are essentially motivated by two things: extrinsic motivators, external to the self. So money, sex, fame, right? Things you're going out trying to get, food, right? Or internal motivators, intrinsic motivators, curiosity. I want to go check something out. Passion. Oh my God, I can't stop thinking about this, right? Purpose. Oh my God, I have to feed the hungry, whatever. These are big intrinsic motivators. And it turns out there are about 5 core intrinsic motivators. And the way the biology is designed to work is curiosity is essentially the most basic fuel of motivation, right? I am curious about something. Passion is essentially if you can identify 4 or 5 or 10 things you're curious about and find a place that 3 or 4 or 5 of them really intersect, that's a lot of energy. When 5 or 6 of your major curiosities intersect at one point on one thing, that's the seed kernel of passion. You cultivate that over time and couple it to a cause greater than yourself. Now you've got purpose. Once you have purpose, by the way, what do you need next? Autonomy. It's the freedom to pursue your purpose, right? And once you have that, what do you need? Mastery, the skills to get better and pursue your purpose. And that's the stack. That's how biology is actually designed to work. So if you go to passionrecipe.com, we have claimed the URL. This is, we can give this to your listeners. This is essentially the exercise we built for anybody. It's what's laid out in The Art Impossible. We're just sort of giving it away to people because it's pretty easy to run. The couple things to know about this: there are more steps in between that involve sort of playing with your passion in very specific ways. The reason that's so important, you want to go slow here. If you don't know what your passion and purpose is, you don't want to be 2 to 3 years into a passion only discover it was a fake, right? Like that's really demotivated, and it's demotivating for you. And think about like being a kid. You get really into something for a couple of years. Your parents spend lots of money to send you to the Natural History Museum for dinosaur classes and all that money on the models and everything else. And suddenly it's not dinosaurs, it's comic books. Demotivating for the folks around you too, right? After a little while, they stop trusting you a little bit. So you don't want to screw that up. You want to go slowly through those steps. Almost everything else in the book is either it literally comes down to 6 things you do every day and 7 things you do every week. That's the final summary of it. But there's a bunch of stuff you got to do first before you get to that point. This is one of those things. And it's sort of where you start. You don't even want to set goals, right? Because your goals have to, again, 3 tiers of goals as we break it down in the book, but the goals have to be reflective of curiosity, passion, purpose, autonomy, and mastery. Right? They all got to be lined up to get the most value. And very quickly, because I don't want to mystify all this, what you get at each step of the way is a little more neurochemistry, right? It starts out, curiosity is a little bit of norepinephrine and dopamine. Passion is more norepinephrine and dopamine. Purpose is essentially norepinephrine and dopamine coupled to like a little serotonin, these are better, bigger pleasure chemicals and so forth. And the whole point of this is the system builds on itself in that way. And what do you get out of it? Focus for free. That's the big deal. performance is very few levers, as most of us know. It's focus and attention, it's habits, right? There aren't a whole lot we have to work with at a real level. Grit, there's handful of other things. The brain, 2% of your body weight, 25% of your energy at rest. Huge energy hog. Focus, very expensive, right? Think about what it takes to pay attention to something you're not interested in. Think about what it's like to do a work task you don't want to do, that you feel isn't in line with your values, like that's resistance. Now you need grit. Now you got to work harder. But if all this stuff is lined up, you get focus for free. You get the most expensive thing the body has to do, essentially consciously. What am I going to pay attention to? What am I choosing to filter out? And you get it for free on the stuff that matters most to you. And since flow which is at the core of my work, the state underneath of optimal performance, flow always follows focus. Anything that drives our attention to the right here, right now, can help produce flow. So not only by stacking all these things up, do you get focus for free, but flow, which is this huge, enormous boost in productivity and performance and innovation, creativity and learning and et cetera, is the result of getting it right. And that will only boost performance even farther.
Wow. I love this. So many holes we can go down. I'm curious real quick. So even after one of these podcasts, I put so much energy, effort, and I'm just like fully focused on this. And a lot of times just ended up in a flow state. But later in the day, even shortly after sometimes, I just feel like absolutely drained and wrecked. Like I would love to decouple that even more, just hearing this from you.
So simply put, two things to know here. We'll do them fast. Flow is not a binary. It's not a light switch. You're not in the zone or out of the zone. It's a 4-stage cycle that you have to move through. And on the back end, after a flow state, there is a recovery period. I teach in the book recovery as a grit skill. Peak performers have the grit to recover. They pursue active recovery. They don't. Passive recovery is TV and a beer. Active recovery is breath work and meditation and mindfulness, kind of yoga, but not vigorous yoga, more like stretching yoga, a hot Epsom salt bath, a nap, a sauna, 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night, those kinds of really deep principles. And they know it's a grit skill, because it's hard after a day, even after a flow state, you're fired up. You did this kick-ass thing in the world and you sort of want to keep going. You want to keep chasing that feeling. And no, you've actually got to shut it down. And you really, in flow, one of the secrets to a high flow lifestyle is actually learning to not ride the up to up. Because that up is neurochemically expensive. It's dopamine and norepinephrine, and your body is burning energy to create those chemicals, and it's burning resources to create those chemicals. And you sort of like, you want them for the state, for the thing you're doing. And then when you're done doing the thing you're doing, you want to put it down as fast as you possibly can. This is why rock stars who have done this for a while, they get off stage and they go back to the hotel room as fast as possible to be alone. And it's the weirdest thing in the world, literally, to go from 100,000 people screaming at you to I'm alone in a hotel room. And I'm just like any other schmuck alone in a hotel room. It sucks. You know what I mean? Like the same deal, but they get it, because you don't, if you keep riding that high too high, if you go to the after party and you try to chase the high, one, you can chase it with substances, never good. Two, you're chasing a feeling that you'd rather have the next night when you were on stage, right? So they shut it down because they know by shutting it down, they're going to get more of it the next time they need it.
How did you figure that out for yourself, right? Like that oscillation, how did you know when you're riding that flow wave and it's, you know what, if I want this to be better next time, I've got to end this. That's supposed to be a really hard thing to figure out.
I think it's really hard to figure out. I think it's individual. I think it's situational. I start to notice. So one of the ways it's easier for me to answer this question as a creative, as a writer. So when you get a lot of dopamine in your system and norepinephrine, but predominantly dopamine, that amplifies pattern matching and pattern recognition, the ability to lump like with like. So what you get a lot of this in creative flow states. It's why one good idea leads to the next, leads to the next, leads to the next, right? That's pattern matching. It's triggered by more dopamine in your system, which you get a lot of it in flow. There's a point at which it's diminishing returns. And there's a point at which I start to notice bigger tangents in my thinking. There's also a point at which if stuff becomes grandiose, that's always a sign it's time for me to cut it off. Grandiosity is something else that comes with dopamine, and you want to it's the thing. We have t-shirts at the Flow Research Collective. That's the only swag we have. It says never trust the dopamine. It's the greatest feel-good chemical in the world that massively amplifies performance. Scott Schmidt, early big mountain extreme skier, used to say about flow makes me feel like Superman up until the moment I'm not. That's the dopamine, right? And everybody's got to figure out where their line is. But one way to do that is we sort of know that flow can amplify your skills roughly at any one time. You can push to stay in the challenge skills sweet spot, the golden rule of flow's most important trigger, the task at hand, the challenge of it slightly exceeds your skill set. So you want to strike, not snap. That's in the challenge skills sweet spot. It really focuses attention on what you're doing. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the godfather of flow theory, sat down with a Google mathematician, and they once back of the envelope calculated, thought the difference between challenge and skills was roughly 4%. Right. And that's a back of the envelope. We tried to test that number, and we found it was fairly accurate as a metaphorical guidepost. And what's useful about that is 4% is outside your comfort zone. So shy or meeker people are going to have to get used to being outside their comfort zone, but chargers, hard type A, peak performers, 4% is so much smaller than what you're normally trying to tackle. So I'll find, that means as a skier, I won't, if I'm comfortable on a 10-foot cliff and I want to level up my game, I know that peak performance takes place in this window of safely of 4 or 5%. So I won't try to simply jump a 30-foot cliff. I will go 12 feet, 14 feet, 18 feet. Laird Hamilton, the big wave surfer, once pointed this out to me, and I totally agree. And he said, when people look at what we do, it looks absolutely insane and impossible. They see me riding a 60-foot wave and they go, oh my God, what the hell is that? But what they didn't see is me at 5 years old riding a 1-foot wave, and at 6 years old riding a 2-foot wave, and at 7 years old riding a 3-foot wave, and 8 years old riding a 4-foot wave, and so forth. So you didn't see the chain that got me here. You just see the end result, and you think, oh, there's no way I can do that, because you miss all the steps.
Great point. I'm pretty sure Laird has a documentary on Netflix, I think, and he even uncouples that about that slow building process. I'm really intrigued, though. You were talking about this a little bit earlier, and it's around that game selection. And one of the things you uncover, and I know a lot of David Epstein's work, he's a past guest, just about really kind of not diving all in right off the bat and really decoupling and practicing a few different things at one time.
Yeah, if the patch wrestling, which we talked about earlier, is essentially a formula for match quality, right? The point of David's recent book is range. And there's a David Epstein blurb on the back of the book, because I don't know David super well, but I called him and I was like, dude, I think I wrote more about your work than almost anybody else's work besides my own in this book. So you got to take a look and see, did I screw it up? And, and he liked it, was kind enough to give me a blurb, but his stuff on match quality instead of immediate specialization, right, is essentially about hunting for the intersection of multiple curiosities, right? Where do your curiosities intersect your values and your strengths and all? That's the bundle you're looking for, in a sense. And his stuff is really a great argument for that component. And it's worth bringing up a secondary thing, which is one of the things that I've tried to do in this book is there are awesome books about pieces of this puzzle. David wrote a great book about match quality and learning. There are phenomenal books about focus or habits, mindfulness or gratitude or flow for that matter. But what there isn't, what I'm hoping the art of the possible actually is the first time we've looked at the entire big picture put together, and especially backed by neuroscience, because now that's what unlocked it, right? Two things happened over the past 10 years. One, the neuroscience massively accelerated. Two, peak performance went from this invisible art where nobody talked about it. And if you worked in that field, you worked with the military or you worked with professional sports teams and you never shared secrets because there was a competitive, right? Like if I'm working with peak performance with the US Special Forces, I'm not going to go like write a book about what I'm doing because our enemies are going to read that book, right? Like you don't do that, and you didn't. And then podcast happened. And suddenly peak performance was made visible and you could see the full suite, and the neuroscience was made visible, and put them together and you could get Art Impossible. You can be like, oh yeah, here's how they all fit together. Here's why, and here's the blueprint. Which is not, those other books are, a lot of them are awesome. They really, really, really are. I'm just hoping that this is the first time you're like, oh, now I get it. Now I know why I have to do all these, things and how they work together and what I can throw out, what's nonsense also.
Yeah. Piecing all that together. One thing I'm thinking about though, is there's going to be people who are listening to this and they're like, I don't have this mindset. What are you talking about? These huge astronomical goals. What do you say to those people who don't yet want to take on those big challenges and just don't really have that growth mindset?
Yeah. So I will say I've spent 30 some years basically studying those moments in time when the impossible becomes possible. I'll tell you the two clearest lessons from my time are: one, we are all capable of so much more than we know. Two, human potential is invisible, especially to ourselves. Human capability is an emergent property. It emerges when we push our skills and use our skills to the utmost again and again and again. So I don't blame you is my point. All I'm saying is you're probably capable of so much more than you know, almost to the T, with very few exceptions of everybody I've encountered in thousands of people who have tackled these kinds of challenges and succeeded against them. Almost none of them started out extraordinary people. They all did extraordinary things. They all started out just like you and me. They had a slightly bigger vision maybe, or a slightly bigger dream, and they went at it and went at it and went at it and discovered small I impossible after small I impossible after small I impossible along the way, right? It's one step at a time, and all this stuff works like compound interest. So you have to you apply it day after day after day, and yeah, you'll start noticing differences, but it's like 3 years in when you look around and you go, oh my God, you asked me when we started this conversation, maybe we can bring it full circle as we end it. What's different 3 years from now? Like what's different is I can look back over the past 3 years and I can go, holy crap, how the hell did I do all that? I wrote 4 books. I launched an 8-figure company. You know what I mean? I built a house and moved my family and did a whole bunch of other things. And it's like, I did it in 4 years. And like, if you would have gone back to my 20s, if I would have pulled one of those things, my first book took 11 years. You know what I mean? If I would have pulled one of those things off in a 4-year window, that would have been a huge win. Forget 12 or 15 or whatever, right? It would have been a miracle if I would have just one of those things in that time frame. And that's sort of my point is I don't and maybe this book isn't, I say this book is definitely not for everybody, right? But I do believe that the only thing that is more emotionally difficult than the toil of trying to live up to our dreams is the emotional pain of not. Right. I think we know. I think on a daily, moment by moment basis that you're here to do something. And look, I understand that there are people in incredibly challenging situations where there's something to do simply, I'm going to figure out how to feed myself. I'm going to figure out how to get away from this toxic relationship. Those are the first, right? Those are the first impossible you're going to have to solve. And they're awful and they're hard. But once you solve those things, right, it's, well, okay, I did that. What else can I do next? What can I do next? What can I do next? And that's, I think, the real point. So maybe it's not for everybody. if you're totally psyched about average, you know what I mean? And there are a lot of people who love that, who are like, you know what I mean? Like, my life is fulfilling. I'm good with everything I'm doing. Cool. Totally fine. There's a ton of peak performance stuff in there, and it might help you do the stuff you're doing a lot better, but maybe you don't want the huge goals. Cool. But as a general, I think most of us got that little voice inside us that's saying, hey man, you sure? You sure you don't want to try a little harder or do a little bit more or go, you know what I mean? And so that's what I mean. And I like people who have unreasonable expectations for their lives. I do. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm here one time, and I don't know why I wouldn't push the limits and try to get everything out of this. You were talking, yeah, absolutely. And I'm assuming the majority of the people listening to this, they're absolutely high performers and looking for that as well. I am thinking about the skills and just decoupling your own skills. And I'm always intrigued about, how do you approach going after strengths and doubling down on those versus just leveling up some of the weaknesses you have? How do you view that?
Sorry, one more time. You cracked up for half of it. Minute. I think it was on my end. I just lost the second half of the question.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering, with skill development, how do you approach just doubling down on your strengths or trying to level up some of those weaknesses you have? How do you approach that?
Yeah, okay. It's a great question. Here's how I think about it. I think it's worth, you want to train your weaknesses, but I train my weaknesses very, very slowly. I will pick 1 or 2 weaknesses a year, and I will poke at them an hour a week kind of thing, and do it very, very slowly, because training weaknesses is really demotivating for me. Other people might be a little bit different, and there's a reason they're weaknesses. And often when you're training up true deep weaknesses, you're trying to get over a belief barricade too, a trust barricade. You have to believe you can do this thing, right? Not just do the thing. You have to sort of change both. And the research seems to show that that's best done slowly, a little bit at a time. So one of the secrets there is training weaknesses sucks. You know what I mean? Like, and I can give you, an examples from, if you want, of like ways I approached it, but strengths, which is the other side of the coin, I think that's a learning skill. And what I mean by that is, there's really good work on strengths by Martin Seligman, Chris Peterson. I like their work a lot. And they found that if you work in such a way where you use 1 or 2 or your 3 or 4 of your core strengths the most, it is a great flow hack. It produces a tremendous amount of flow, which is very, very beneficial. And obviously, when you're working with your strengths, you pay a lot of attention. It feels better. You generate some neurochemistry. You learn a lot more. I don't say don't do that. I say integrate your strengths. Like the research showed by Seligman, that if you really want to lean on your strengths, try to use one of your kind of 3 to 5 core strengths in a new way every week, right? Try to live and work that way. I do that stuff inside of my work, right? I'm going to write every day, no matter what, because I'm working on a book or a project. And so I will always write in such a way that I'm trying to train up a weakness a little bit and leverage a couple of strengths while I do that. I won't go out of my way often to train up my strengths outside of, the core things that I do. You know what I mean? I tend to keep those, like the strengths that I will leverage are the strengths that I'm going to use in skiing or writing or doing flow research, kind of like those things. Whereas weaknesses are, I realized a couple of years ago that I kept having difficulties because I just hated dealing with lawyers. I hated contracts. I hated legalese. And the deeper I got into the business, the more I started to realize contracts are actually your friend, and they're ways of really preserving relationships in the face of hardship and blow, and they're beneficial. And once I sort of got to that mindset, I decided that I was going to learn legalese, which is awful, right? I mean, my brother's a lawyer. It's sort of in my family, but like the language is terrible. But and I started very simply by reviewing all of my contracts. Every contract I'd ever signed that I had floating around my computer, I just started once a week. I would read like 3 of the contracts and look up every term I didn't know. And, just kept going and kept going. And the way I sort of judged my progress was every time I talked to my lawyers, one of my lawyers for a business thing, which is usually once or twice a month, it was how much of the conversation, scale of 1 to 10, did I actually understand, right? Like how many times did I have to say, hey, I'm sorry, you just got to explain that to me like I was a 4-year-old. What the hell did you just say, right? Like I counted it was a simple scorecard for me, but, and it took about 1.5 years till I was really comfortable with the legal language that surrounded every aspect of my job and the work I did in the world. But I did it very slowly, and I didn't get mad at myself for, you know what I mean? You gotta, with training weaknesses, you have to absolutely forgive failure, and you have to sort of realize one of the reasons all this stuff is so hard is learning is invisible. You're bad until you're better, right? Our experience, because learning has to happen in an adaptive unconscious level. So our conscious experience is, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks. I'll never learn this. I'm terrible. This sucks. I'm a failure. Oh, fuck, I did that. Right? Like that's the experience of it kind of thing. Often, on our end of it. Andrew Huberman, who's a neuroscientist we do a lot of work with at Stanford, says, and I think this is totally true, says the biggest difference between peak performers and everybody else is that peak performers know that it's always crawl, walk, run, and everybody else will look for a shortcut around crawl and around walk. They want to, like, I just want to run. And peak performers are like, well, you're going to waste 2 to 5 years. This is the biohacking crowd, who will, right? They will do anything to find a quick, they'll spend days measuring their poo and their calories so they can get like 0.001% better kind of thing, because it's easier than like making a psychological fit that'll make you grittier so you don't have to get that right. Like I see that a lot in that world.
Yeah, no, I love Dr. Andrew Huberman's work out at Stanford. He's got some great stuff. He's an upcoming guest as well. One thing I would love to tackle there, and just question around, I love how you position those weaknesses, because those can be absolutely draining. I almost view it like if your structure is writing, that structure is the outline of a house. And then within that house, you can work on kind of painting a certain door a certain way. We can call that a weakness. So that way, the main things you're working on are the big balls you're trying to move, but then you can tackle your weaknesses within that. Is that kind of what you were saying?
So I said there's an order to this whole thing. So I think, and I'll give you a big picture. The first thing you got to do is you got to align those core 5 intrinsic motivators where we started. Then I said there are 3 levels of goal setting, right? Big mission statement, high hard goals, how you fulfill that, and then clear goals, what the shit you're doing today to try to get to your high hard goals, which tries to get you to your mission statement. And then next up, there are 6 kinds of grit, which you need when the motivation and the goals stop working, which they always will, right? Because the path to impossible is long, and that, like, you're going to run out of motivation. Like, the focus for free is awesome, but there are just going to be days where like it doesn't matter and you're screwed and you need grit. What the research shows is perseverance is where you start. You start with physical perseverance, then you go into cognitive perseverance. Then you seem to want to start training up thought control, like controlling, right? That's a separate kind of grit. So perseverance, first level. Second level is thought control, what's going on upstairs. Third level is training to be your best when you're at your worst. We can come back to that in a second. After you've got that shit down, then, in my opinion, should you start training weaknesses, because it's so demotivating to train weaknesses that if you haven't lined up some of the other grit skills first, you could end up like they could KO the whole enterprise, right? Because it's so crappy to do that stuff that it really freaks us out and we feel helpless, and it erodes our confidence and blah, blah, blah. So I say there's a bunch of other grit skills you work on first, and then you come to your weaknesses. And once you are there, the next level is the grit to control your fear, which is, I think, kind of like the final big, it's the hardest one. It's the most rewarding because fear gives you the most focus for free. If you think about the stuff that scares us, you can't stop paying attention. The problem is if fear is producing too much anxiety or cortisol, it blocks all the good peak performance stuff you need. So you have to really have a lot of confidence in your motivation and your grit skills, right? So that when you're actually like are dealing with weaknesses and fears, the stuff that's at the back end of this process, higher chances of success, right? You want to set yourself up for success when you're training grit in that way. And that's how I think about it.
Oh, no, that's awesome. That's why you're the expert. I'm just the one asking the questions here. That was fantastic. One thing you did hit on, I just want to hit on real quick, is just being your best at your worst. Could you tackle that for a second?
So let me give you an example. So this is actually, if you go to psychologists and you say, what is grit? They're probably going to give you some version of Angela Duckworth's current definition, which is the intersection of passion and perseverance. She's right. You will find gritty people who have their intrinsic motivations stacked up correctly and they're matching up with perseverance. But if you talk to peak performers, they will tell you, hey, there's 6 levels of grit. And when my head sort of got kicked sideways on this, I was talking to Josh Waitzkin, who, if you're not familiar with his work, he wrote the book, The Art of Learning. He was a chess master. Then he became a martial artist and master in 2 different martial arts. And I was doing the same thing in surfing. So 4 different disciplines, 1 cognitive, 3 physical, and wildly different. Like one of his martial arts was Tai Chi push hands, and the other was grappling and jujitsu, right? Radically different arts. And he achieved expert level mastery in all of them. So knows a thing or two about this. He said, man, the thing you got to train is the grit to be your best when you're at your worst. That's the real distinguisher for peak performers. Let me give you an example of what that looks like in my own life. I give a lot of speeches. I give a lot of high consequence speeches. When I practice my speeches, I write them. Then I'll do them for, I have an editor who I work with on an almost weekly basis. So I'll do them for him, make sure it's tight, practice it out loud a couple more times. And then I will wait for a day when I didn't get 7-8 hours of sleep the night before, where I was up late, didn't have a lot of sleep. I'll work a 10 to 12 hour day. I'll go to the gym and I'll go doubly hard at the gym. I'll come home, I'll take my dogs and I'll hike up the mountain behind my house and I'll deliver my speech. And if I can give a speech exhausted while going up a mountain at the end of a 14-hour day, I can give it anywhere. And I'll give you an example of why you do that. I got a really amazing opportunity a couple of years ago. I opened for Obama at a very big conference in Norway or Finland, Norway, I think. And it's obviously a big deal. There were like 25,000 people in the auditorium. There were another 50,000 people watching. So it's 75,000 people, which is a very big audience. I'm standing backstage. I'm about to go on. I'm standing with the guy whose conference it is. And he's looking really nervous. And I'm really casual. And I'm like, dude, chill out. I got this. The talk is exactly 37 minutes. Like you asked, 37 minutes. They wanted it 37 and 30 seconds. And I said, it's 37 and 25 seconds. So I've got 5-second leeway. Don't worry, I got this. He said, what do you mean? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you didn't get the note we sent out 2 weeks ago? He said, what are you talking about? He said, you have to make this 32 minutes. Oh, by the way, you're on in 10, 9, 8, and threw me on stage. And I had to cut in real time 5 minutes from a speech that I was giving for 75,000 people while opening for Obama. And it was I had fun and I did it. But I had to solve that in real time. And that's why because I already knew, I was like, well, that's not as hard as giving a speech while running up a mountain and totally exhausted. I know that. Like I've done both now and I can definitely tell you it's not. And I knew that walking on the stage. So I was like, okay, I've done this under conditions of absolute exhaustion, finding 5 minutes that I could cut out and talk faster for. I got this. And by the way, I brought it in at 32 minutes and 10 seconds.
No, I absolutely love it. I love hearing these stories, man. Stephen, every time we get to connect, I learn so much, walk away learning so much more for anyone who isn't quite as exposed to your work, what else do you think they should expect going into this and into the new work?
Well, let's give people like a kind of look at the things that you should expect. Is the book covers 4 major categories: motivation, which is a catch-all, right, for intrinsic motivation, grit, and goal setting; learning, creativity, and flow. And the reason behind that is essentially the cognitive peak performance suite. That's our biology. That's all of it. The way to think about it is, if peak performance is a game where you're sort of competing against yourself and the world in a sense, motivation is what gets you into the game, right? Grit and goals kind of keep you there, right? Learning is what allows you to continue to play. Creativity is how you steer, and flow is how you turbo boost the whole thing beyond your reasonable expectations, right? That's the whole suite. So that's all the stuff we're going to cover. And it is the most, hopefully you got this too. It's a big picture. It's a big think book. There's no way around it. But it's also, as far as I can tell, with the exception of Bold, which I don't think was as good as this, hopefully, in my opinion, these are the only 2 like big think how-to books anybody's ever tried to write, because it's a moronic thing to try to, it's so hard. Like as a writing challenge, it's really like, you shouldn't ever do that to yourself. But I felt it was really, one of the other things I was very frustrated with, books come out of frustration sometimes, right? And this one was like, God damn it, people are doing it wrong, and they're making it harder and more complicated, and they're lying and they're gussying up like, oh, this is this thing that I learned, so I'm gonna tell you it's the secret. And that would be like me saying, flow is the only secret there is to peak performance, and I'm the world's leading expert on flow, so let me tell you flow. Well, that's not true. There's actually motivation, learning, creativity, flow, right? There's a suite of tools here. The one thing that I can sell and make money from in the world, like, it's not the secret. One person has the secret. It's a frustration. It shows up in the tech community too. You see it with flow, where flow is this huge, complicated change in neuronal processes, neuroelectricity changes, neurochemistry changes, networks change, which structures of the brain get active, all of it. There's a lot of people who have like EEG headsets that can use neurofeedback to get you to like 8 to 10 hertz, which is baseline brainwaves for flow. But it's not flow. It's just the brainwave tuning for flow. It's also the brainwave tuning for basically like daydream and a couple other things, you know what I mean? So like, there's a bunch of people, some of whom are friends of mine, who have devices on the market and they're running around saying, use our thing, it gets you into flow. Well, no, it doesn't. It gets you like 1/4 of the way there, and it may not actually be the most important quarter because we don't know, right? And it may be different in individuals, and we don't know. Like, there's a lot of questions I have around that, and I get nervous whenever I see that. Just like when I get nervous when people are like, oh my God, I've cracked the code on habit, and the code on habit is the only thing you need to know, and let me teach you habit 1, 2, you're like, well, not so much, right? Like, and I'm not saying, some of this stuff, when there's not data, for example, long haul creativity, how do you sustain creative decision-making, creative performance over the long haul? I openly admit, like, hey, this is a part of the book where this is a really important part of peak performance, and we don't yet have the data. So I have gone out, I've interviewed the best people in the world about these problems, and I'm giving you the best, the advice that comes up the most commonly out of interviewing 1,000 people. 20 of them said this, 20, you know what I mean? That's sort of how I did it. But I'm trying to steer from the data as much as possible, rather than steer from like the thing that I discovered.
Gotcha.
Kind of thing.
No, that's great. 2 more quick ones here as we wrap up. I'm wondering, for you, what's next in terms of what don't you know yet about flow or peak performance?
So, yeah, it's a great question. Next in July, I actually have another novel, because of
course you do.
I have another novel. Well, also because I that's a challenge. I don't think I've written 5 novels at this point. 2 are published, 2 are in drawers. 6 not, yeah, 2 are published, 2 are in drawers that'll never get published, and 1 is coming out. I haven't solved that yet. You know what I mean? Like, my novels, they're not communicating at the level I want them to communicate. They're not fun enough. there's a lot of, I'm writing cult classics. I'm not writing big, broad, you know what I mean? And I want to try to do that. So there's challenges there. And no, the next big book is on intuition, which to me, I call it the last uncharted wilderness of human peak performance. And it's sort of, we talked a little about the goal-directed system, which is the most important thing going on inside of us and the least understood system by most people. Like you can't I can walk up to most people and say, hey man, fear shapes your perceptions, for example. And most people kind of they're like, yeah, I kind of knew that. Like, or, you know, that idea is in the ballpark. But if you walk up and like, yeah, you're a goal-directed system. Do not take advantage of that. They're like, what are you talking? I'm a what? Huh? Right. And yet it's sort of a big part of who we are. And it's a big part of like how our intuition works neurobiologically. So that's what I'm tackling next. And it actually, I say this now, I think we're going to wait a little while. Like, I think it could be a couple years till we see this one. Or at least if you see the top shelf and the shelf beneath that behind me, I think 2/3 of those books are in insight and intuition, and I have to go back through all of them again before I can write this next book. So, you know, how long does it take me to read 17 textbooks?
Yeah.
Start the clock.
a little bit of time. Final one here as we wrap up. I would love to know, anyone throughout history, dead or alive, just not a family member or friends, if you could do this, just have an evening interviewing, talking to them.
William James, not even a question. Harvard philosopher, psychologist, founder of psychology. There's a lot of William James quotes in the book. I have flat out said, I said this, I think in Stealing Fire, I dedicated Stealing Fire to William James because I sort of feel like he was there first. And not entirely, but a lot of what I'm doing is taking his ideas and layering in neuroscience. So I'll give you one simple example. We talked about, I have said, getting your biology to work for you rather than against you is like peak performance. 100 years ago, William James said, the great thing then in any education is to make your nervous system, meaning your brain and your body, your ally, not your enemy. Right? He knew that 100 years ago. We now know why exactly, right? He was right. And because we know why exactly he was right, I can train you from it, right? We can use it. I can, like, James made this great comment, but okay, how the fuck do you befriend your nervous system? Yeah. Like, okay, like what, right? And now it's 100 years later and we're like, well, okay, gratitude practices, tips, the negativity bias towards the positive, and mindfulness separates emotion from feeling in a way that you're less reactive. And we literally, like, there's 3 or 4 other techniques, but we know how to exercise, tame our nervous systems for peak performance. We didn't back then. In fact, you know, James was writing about meditation and varieties of mystical experiences. He thought it was a tool for spiritual people, right? That's where, but he was right about, like, it helped them tune their nervous system. He just thought you had to be religious to do it. 100 years later, we're like, oh, wait a minute, it's just biology. I got it. When we focus on breathing for a while and lengthen out our breathing, amazing things seems to happen to our performance. And now we know why, right? Down to like exactly what it does to the anterior cingulate cortex and what, you know, blah, blah, blah.
I love it. Every single time, Stephen, stretching my imagination, making me think deeper and harder. You are Stephen Kotler. The book is The Art of Impossible, a peak performance primer, out January 19th. It's linked up in the show notes. Stephen, once again, I can't thank you enough for joining us on What Got You There.
My pleasure. And I just want to remind people, nothing says I love you like The Art of Impossible. I'm just joking.